I'll tell you what. It's not just the same my mom and dad used to tell me all the time growing up. It's a book written by Ann Edwards Cannon, a column writer, advice column writer for the Salt Lake Tribune, author, and also creative writer instructor. And here to talk about her book that just released this spring is Ann Edwards Cannon on the couch joining me. Thank you so much for being on the Mountain Morning Show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always fun to come to Park City.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of nice to, work here every now and then.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
I'll tell you what.
Uh-huh.
It's a collection of columns from the Salt Lake Tribune, which you write for.
Yeah.
They're hilarious.
Oh, thank you.
They're funny. I was skimming over this last night, and there was just columns. I think the one that kind of stood out to me the most was how you treat your grandkids differently at ball games than
Yeah,
you treat your own kids.
Right. Yep. You do. It's, I've often said that having grandkids is more what I thought being a parent would be like than actually what being a parent was like. So it's fun. You can just indulge them like crazy, and it's great.
Yeah, and then basically the whole premise is like with your kids, you specifically say cotton candy, where your kids are like, I want cotton candy, and you're like, no cotton candy,
Right.
It's gonna get everywhere. And then when you do buy the cotton candy for your kids, you're like, put it in your mouth, you're getting it on your face.
Yeah.
And then when the grandkids want cotton candy, you're like, yeah, no problem.
No problem, and it's adorable when you just spread it everywhere. So yeah, there is a big difference.
So what got you to wanting to make this book?
So I also work part-time at the King's English Bookstore in Salt Lake City, which is a great little bookstore. Come and see us. But my Betsy Burton, who's the owner of the store, along with Ann Holman, who's a co-owner and also the manager, said, you know what, we want to try something. Why don't we gather your columns and we'll publish them as a store? Independent bookstores have access to this program that Ingram, which is a distributor, does, where we can now self-publish. So we decided to do it. We gathered some of our favorite columns. I pulled out a few pictures and we did it. And I have to say, I'm so pleased with the way that it looks, because sometimes, this was the maiden voyage for all of us. I had no idea how it would turn out, but that's what we did.
So, did you have to go through all the columns you've written and kind of pick your favorites, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so I've actually been doing a version of this column for about 30 years. First for a magazine called Parent Express, then I wrote for the Desert News for a long time. But I've been with the Trib for about 8 or 9 years now. And the thought of like going back and looking at columns, because, honestly, I kind of bore myself after a while. I just thought, So I asked some people what columns they remembered, and I also came up with kind of categories so that I could focus my search on columns. So that's kind of how it happened.
Is there any one special column that you can always kind of think back to that you're like, yeah, we kind of started with that one, and that was kind of like the setting for all the others?
Well, do you know what? I think one of the things that happened with this book is that one of the reasons Ann and Betsy approached me is that my father had died recently, and they said, let's pull together some of your columns, but let's also have this book kind of, at least part of it, be a tribute to your dad. So in a way, I started with the last section in this book, which are columns specifically about him. And I also included things that I had started to write while he was failing. I would be down in Provo with my parents during the day. Then I would go home in the afternoon and sit outside in the shed, basically, that we have in the backyard, and just write down memories of him. So it kind of started with those kinds of columns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you have to write anything new for the book, or was this specifically just all columns that you've previously written?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of them are columns that had already been published, but especially in that last section, there are some original pieces there that I wrote, as I say, while my dad was ill, and so those have particularly special meaning to me.
And it says that you're an advice columnist for the Salt Lake Tribune.
Yeah.
It seems you're more of, it's almost like a comedy writer to me. What kind of advice do you give in the Tribune, and do you still give advice in the Tribune?
Yeah, so the way that that's working now, so for a long time I just had this column, which is more of sort of a personal interest kind of, it was supposed to be humorous if I could manage it. And that's basically what these are. But about a year and a half ago, Jennifer Napier Pierce, who's the editor at the Salt Lake Tribune, called me in, and you know, honestly, I just thought I was going to be fired or something because I don't know. I mean, that's my life. I always am waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. I mean, every time our GM here is like, "Hey, Conrad, I need to talk to you." I'm like, "Well, boys, time to pack up the bags. I'm heading out."
I know. I mean, really. So, but she called me in and she said, "I have an idea, and I think maybe you might be able to do this." She said, "I would like to do an advice column, like, you know, Dear Abby, Ann Landers, Cheryl Strayed used to do one, Dear Prudence, you know." So anyway, she said, "I want just you to do an advice column." And I go, okay. And in my maiden column, my maiden voyage column, I just said, "Listen, I am not licensed to do anything in the state of Utah except drive a car. I just want to be totally clear about that. I'm not a therapist. I don't have a background in any of this. But okay, let's go for it."
Yeah.
So people just send in questions, and then I just try to answer them. And sometimes I have an opportunity to if it's a certain kind of question, I can kind of have some fun with it. But a lot of the questions I get are they're more serious, and then I try to adopt a more respectful tone. And my whole thought is to just focus on what that person is dealing with. I'm very aware that maybe somebody else would have another point of view about this. If I heard from the other person involved, it would probably be a different story. But my plan is to just focus on what they're telling me and then just say what I feel like.
Are you worried about criticism at all? Because I know that sometimes, you know, with giving advice, some people are like, "We don't want to hear what you have to say." Like, "Oh, you're not licensed," as you said. Like, what gives you any more authority than Joe Snow down the street?
I think that the people who send the question actually do want to hear what you have to say or what I have to say. But the fun thing about this column actually is it is in fact interactive, because people will read it and they'll go, "Wow, she's really off base." And people will lots of times on the comment board will give alternate pieces of advice. And to me, that's just fine. I mean, I think that's one of the pleasures of that. I don't really ever feel criticized very much. I felt criticized more heavily actually for the other column that I used to do. This one I just go into it going, boy, there are a lot of different points of view about this, and so that's fine. You know, the only thing I want is for people to be respectful in their tone. That doesn't always happen on the comment boards, but oh well, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the comment sections on any internet webpage can be the most wretched vial of hive and scum, or wretched hive vial. I'm messing up a Star Wars quote, and it's early morning for me, guys. I'm basically quoting Obi-Wan with Mos Eisley, but do you welcome that community aspect sometimes? Like, do you kind of welcome that discussion?
Well, here's the thing. The problem with, like you say, internet commentary is because people don't really have to own their comments with their own identity. Sometimes people are their worst selves. You know, like if you're writing a letter to the editor, you usually have to like have your name in the paper and all that, and it makes people tone down their worst impulses. And so, you know, there's that part of the internet community that I think is unfortunate. And yet at the same time, I'm glad that people have a forum to say what they want to say. So
can it be any questions people can send in to you?
Yeah. The one thing that if I feel like it's really out of my league, then I would write back to the person and I'll just say, you know what, this really maybe requires, you know, maybe you should, you should go see somebody who really knows what they're doing. But, you know, I was listening to this woman who's just, and I've forgotten her name now, I'm sorry, but she's just written a book about advice columnists, actually, and the history of advice columns. And she said, actually, what she discovered over time is that what people want from an advice columnist is not actually a professional. What they want is the feeling of talking to a friend who's going to listen and then just give sort of like life experience advice. So I think, well, you know, I can try to do that.
Well, and it's kind of funny because, you know, sometimes with having, you know, issues, it's almost easier to talk to someone that isn't professional
Yeah.
or family or friends, kind of just talking to someone
Yes.
who you don't have any repercussions with, that you can just ask them, and it's either going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll help you, or this is how it's going to be, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Most importantly, what do you want people to get away from this book? Is it just like, oh, look at all these funny moments we've had, or is there something deeper behind the writing that you hope people see?
Yeah. Writing a personal column is an interesting thing because on the one hand, you're writing about yourself, about your family, about your own life. And there are moments when, you just go, what a narcissistic exercise this is. Like, who wants to read this?
Right.
And so what I would always try to do is think, okay, this is a column, not a Christmas letter. You know how Christmas letters are just like, oh, my family's so awesome, and look at us,
Yeah.
and here are pictures of our trip to Hawaii. And really, reading a Christmas letter can make you feel really crappy about your own life. So I thought, okay, what you want to do in a personal column is, yeah, it's your experience, but maybe it's an experience that speaks to other people's experience. So it's your particulars, but it's a universal experience. Like, those moments when you feel embarrassed, those moments you feel frustrated. And actually, I think the best kind of humor columns grow out of discomfort, where here's the way things should be, but here's how things really happen. And lots of times the way things really happen, it's a mess. So that whole chasm between the real and the unreal, or the expectation, that's really where humor resides. And if you start listening to comics, that's what they do, is they plumb those moments for humor. And if you can do that, it makes Salt feel a little bit better, I think.
Well, I mean, even on the back of the book, it kind of describes you with your husband and sons and daughters-in-law, and with the animals you have. And like the last sentence is, oh, you have 2 cats, a parrot, and a fish that was still alive the last time you checked. Like, even in the description, there's humor in the writing.
Thank you.
And where can people go to figure out, or to find out more about the book, pick it up, and to even send you advice on columns to see
thank you.
Yeah.
And please send questions. Am I looking at the camera? I'm begging people out there. Okay. I would love to have your questions. Send them to me at acannon@sltrib.com. That's my paper email address, and I would love to have more questions. I also have a Facebook through the paper, but I never look at that. My personal Facebook is just Ann Cannon, and I look at that. So send me questions there. For the book, you can go to the King's English Bookstore in Salt Lake City. You can just go online and even buy it there. We ship, and that's where you can get it. So.
And thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show
you.
this
What a
morning.
pleasure.
We appreciate it.
Great to see you.
I'll tell you what, guys, it is absolutely hilarious. I mean, and it's super easy to read. I mean, it's not daunting. It's not going to take you, ages to read. It's super fun, easy, light reading. Definitely pick it up. Send your advice to Ann, or questions to Ann to get advice.
And advice is good too. I need it. So.
Yeah, and even give her advice.
Yeah.
And give me advice on how to be a better host this early in the morning. Guys, we have more coming up on the Mountain Morning Show, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.